Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. We're going to talk a little bit about the United Nations General Assembly and debates. And one of the topics, of course, that is ongoing and has a lot to do with global peace and the direction that humanity is actually going in. As we watch things unfold for Ukraine. And we're going to hear from the president of Moldova as she talks about how she wants to support Ukraine and their continued battle to stop the bullying that has occurred and stop the invasion that has happened. And it's been over a year now since the Russian Federation crossed that border into the Ukraine and attacked them under the idea that, hey, we're the good guys, but along with them, if they're truly the good guys and they're truly on the path to trying to rescue the Ukraine from Western forces, then why are they kidnapping their children? Why are they trying to attack and have drone strikes against grain silos and civilian things that actually help people live? When we look at what the Russian Federation has done in Ukraine, that it doesn't support human rights, it doesn't support peace, nor does it support anything but the greed and the disrespect for what our world should represent by Mr. Putin. So the president of Moldova is going to speak, and as she stands in solidarity with Ukraine against the Russian bully in Eastern Europe.
By Her Excellency Maia Sandu, President of the Republic of Moldova. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome Her Excellency Maia Sandu, President of the Republic of Moldova, and to invite her to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, it is with great pride that I once more stand before you at the General Assembly of the United Nations to represent the Republic of Moldova, a country on the front line of the fight for democracy. Today, Moldova stands stronger and more resilient than a year ago. We stand firm in our belief in a democratic future, and we stand firm with Ukraine as our neighbor continues to resist Russia's brutal invasion and attack on its sovereignty and way of life. We stand firmly for Ukraine's victory, because when Ukraine wins, the free world wins. Now, more than ever, Support for Ukraine must not diminish. Please continue supporting Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine, Moldova, Europe, and the free world are facing an external assault on our values. But countries like mine haven't broken free from imperial chains only to be brought back into servitude. We push forward. We are not facing an imminent military threat, unlike our Ukrainian friends and neighbors. But every day, we are countering Russia's hybrid assault. Russia has teamed up with corrupt crooks to destabilize us. Their hybrid toolbox includes energy blackmail, support for separatism, cyber attacks, and disinformation campaigns. They also tried to overthrow our democratically elected government, but each time they failed. We know they will try again. In soon-to-be-held elections, they will attempt to undermine our citizens' ability to make their own democratic choice. This threat is not unique to us. Many countries in Europe and beyond our continent are feeling the sting of foreign interference in their democratic processes. This hybrid assault is conducted by those who oppose not just our democracy, but all liberal democracies. We must stay vigilant, and we must stand united. Distinguished audience, against all odds, we preserved peace across all of Moldova, including in the breakaway Transnistrian region, where Russian troops are stationed illegally and where concerns about human rights violations are deeply worrying. Our commitment to a peaceful resolution remains steadfast, and I call here today for the unconditional withdrawal of those Russian forces. In light of intertwined challenges, building Moldova's resilience has not been an easy task. Yet, we take heart in the fact that Moldova is not alone. Our friends and partners, the entire free world, stand with us. Building resilience means that Moldova has moved from relying solely on Russian gas to having a mix of energy sources and backup storage. We are also building electricity lines to Europe, investing in energy efficiency, and pursuing renewable sources. The true measure of a democracy's success rests in its ability to deliver a better life and real economic benefits to citizens. Strengthening our economy as the war rages across the border is a daunting challenge, but we are determined. Small and medium-sized enterprises can now access funds to grow. Digital public services are helping to cut red tape. The EU market is open to exports of our fruit and vegetables. Inflation is down to 10% from a peak of 35% last October. A major ratings agency has upgraded our outlook to stable. We are comprehensively reforming the justice system, redoubling our efforts to defeat corruption and organized crime. Part of this effort is reducing the malign influence of fugitive oligarchs who at one time captured our state. I'm grateful to many of you in this room for imposing sanctions on those individuals. The next critical step in this journey is to ensure that the stolen money is returned to the Moldovan people. As evidence of our commitment on corruption perception, as measured by Transparency International, we improved by 24 places in the past 2 years, our best score in a decade. On the Rule of Law Index, part of the World Justice Project, we have advanced by 14 places since 2020. Greater resilience will also come through enhanced transport links with Europe, vitally important given Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports and the disruption of trade routes. We are upgrading roads and railways, and this modernized infrastructure will not only boost our trade and create jobs, but will support solidarity lanes for Ukraine, ensuring that its grain reaches the regions where it's needed most. And one day, these very connections will be aiding Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. As we build up defenses and resilience, Moldova is increasingly recognized as a contributor to regional security, a strong neighbor to Ukraine, and partner to the EU in countering security challenges. But our commitment extends globally. Moldovan servicemen actively contribute to peacekeeping missions, including most recently in the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. Underscoring our commitment to the security of our continent, we hosted the European Political Community Summit last June, a summit that further cemented our place in the European family. Ladies and gentlemen, economic progress, improving security, and reinforcing our democracy are part of our journey towards membership of the European Union. Moldova's European aspirations have long been well known. Last May, 100,000 Moldovans rallied in Chisinau to reassert their commitment to democracy and to EU membership. Let me be clear. Moldova's EU membership is not just a political choice. It is the only way to protect our liberty, peace, and democracy. The enlargement of the EU is the sole path to ensure our neighborhood stays anchored in the free world and that we deliver better lives for our citizens. It would also demonstrate the Union's commitment to peace, the very reason the European Union was built. When it comes to membership, we believe in a fair and merit-driven process and have been doing our work diligently. With this in mind, I call on the European Commission and all EU members to support us. I extend this call beyond the EU borders to all the countries of the free world, especially those with well-established, robust democracies who have long reaped its benefits and understand its worth. The success or downfall of one democracy resonates globally. When one thrives, it inspires hope in others. When one falters, it risks a domino effect. Today, the fight for democracy anywhere is the fight for democracy everywhere. And in this interlinked fight for democracy, we will prevail. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Moldova for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and to invite him to address the Assembly. Your Excellency.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée,
President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, heads of state and government, Secretary General of the United Nations, heads of delegations. The convening of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly affords me the opportunity to share with the member states of our organization the vision and the major concerns of my country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, about the current challenges facing us in the world. Having said that, I wish to preface my remarks by congratulating His Excellency Mr. Denis Francis upon his election as President of our august Assembly, and I assure all the members of his Bureau of the support of my country as they go about their noble mission, the mission conferred upon them by our institution. I also wish to thank the outgoing President, Mr. Chaba Karoshi, for his far-sighted leadership and his devotion, which contributed to moving forward our discussions and finding concerted solutions. I also wish to extend my gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his active and ongoing commitment to peace and international security. President, as our session unfolds here in New York, the people of Morocco have not yet finished mourning their victims. Their wounds have not yet healed, following the powerful earthquakes which took place in the night of Friday the 8th to Saturday the 9th of September. That earthquake caused the death of 3,000 Moroccans. It wounded 5,000, destroying several cities and areas of the kingdom. Furthermore, Libyans have not yet recovered from the trauma of the flooding which claimed the lives of over 20,000 people and caused major damage on Sunday, the 10th of the same month. The people of the DRC welcome the mobilization of the international community to provide assistance to the kindred peoples of the Kingdom of Morocco and of Libya. We express our full compassion and solidarity and wish all the wounded a speedy recovery, all the wounded from these two natural disasters. President, beyond deploring these natural disasters, the current session of the General Assembly falls at an exceptional period of our history where the world faces serious situations that threaten the very existence of human beings. There is the war in Ukraine, which has caused a food crisis marked by skyrocketing prices and shortages of basic goods. Added onto that comes the exacerbation of the effects of climate change and armed conflicts, which have continued to erupt in various places. These crises are mutually reinforcing, and they pose a challenge to the multilateral system and to international cooperation. And yet, the maintenance of international peace and security, guaranteeing justice and human rights, prioritizing social progress, and establishing the best living conditions are what everyone in the world wants and has always wanted. These goals need to remain at the center of our collective action following a truly multilateral and inclusive approach. We are called upon to work together with an eye to responding to these challenges, which are existential in scope. For this fundamental reason, I hail the relevance of this year's topic of our session, which is entitled Rebuilding Trust and Reigniting Global Solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. This topic places the values of solidarity and of trust at the forefront of the factors for recovery and for accelerating the solutions to closely intertwined global challenges in order to move forward peace, security, and sustainable development. These values take on their full meaning in the context of the crisis that we are undergoing today. In this regard, it is vital to recall that at the halfway point towards achievement of the SDGs in 2023, given the climate disasters, the recurrent conflicts, the economic recession, and the persistent after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, inequality and poverty have worsened. Hunger and malnutrition are on the rise. Humanitarian needs and the displacement of populations have reached record heights. Climate and environmental disasters have plunged the world into a systemic existential risk, which is very serious. In order to tackle these scourges, which pose a genuine threat to international peace and security, and which also constitute a major obstacle to the prosperity and progress of nations, it is clear that pooling our energy and taking a multilateral approach with mutual trust and solidarity is a major and indispensable approach. President, the maintenance of international peace and security constitutes the foundation of and the main objective underpinning the creation of the United Nations. Accomplishing this requires more determination and commitment on the part of everyone, given the current threats to peace and security in the world. African peoples often don't understand the equivocal attitude, the double standards at work, the ambiguities, and the procrastination of our organization, especially of its Security Council, in certain political and security crises which are rampaging through Africa and sometimes have rampaged there for decades. This is the case, notably, of the forgotten crisis of Western Sahara, which has riven apart two kindred countries, Algeria and the Kingdom of Morocco, and that crisis has dragged on for several decades. This is also the case when it comes to Mozambique, which has fallen victim to deadly terrorist attacks for roughly 1 decade in the province of Cabo Delgado. This is also the situation in West Africa, in the Sahel-Sahara region. There, the UN troops are withdrawing, leaving behind them the memory of what they haven't achieved, this despite the fact that they embodied all of the hopes of people that were caught in the clutches of jihadism. The Republic of Sudan is no exception either. Sudan is mired in a deadly civil war, which has pitted, since last year, the military personnel loyal to the president of the republic, pitted them against the rapid support forces under the command of General Mohammed Hamdai Dagalo. This war has already caused much death and much material damage as well. The international community is virtually indifferent to the Sudanese tragedy. This is also the place to broach a question of paramount importance to the Democratic Republic of Congo and also of prime importance for building peace in the Great Lakes region. I'm referring to the withdrawal of the United Nations Mission for Stabilization in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO, the withdrawal of MONUSCO from our territory. Following a presence of more than 2 decades by the UN, it's time for my country to fully take its destiny in hand and to become the main protagonist of its own stability. We are grateful to the international community and to the United Nations for their support and their partnership. But we are also aware that the phased withdrawal of MONUSCO is a necessary stage to consolidate progress that we have already achieved. Nonetheless, It should be deplored that the peacekeeping missions that have been deployed in various forms for 25 years in the Democratic Republic of the Congo have not been able to stop rebellions and armed conflicts that have torn apart the DRC and the Great Lakes region, nor have they succeeded in protecting the civilian populations. Therefore, the phased, responsible, and sustainable withdrawal of MONUSCO, which was announced in 2018 and whose transition plan was adopted in 2021, is that planned withdrawal an anachronism given the changes in the political, security, and current social contingencies? It is thus illusory and counterproductive to continue to cling to maintaining MONUSCO to reestablish peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and to stabilize it. Furthermore, the accelerated withdrawal of MONUSCO is absolutely necessary to ease the tensions between MONUSCO and our citizens. It is the time to explore new avenues for strategic collaboration with the United Nations, mechanisms that are more in lockstep with our current realities. This is why, in my capacity as guarantor of under the Constitution, guarantor of the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of my country, and to ensure the good conduct of our nation and the well-being of my compatriots. In this capacity, I've instructed the government of the Republic to begin discussions with the UN authorities to ensure an accelerated withdrawal of MONUSCO from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, moving up the deadline from December 2024 to December 2023. This is the meaning behind the step of our government, which addressed a letter to the President of the Security Council of the United Nations dated 1 September 2023, asking for the accelerated withdrawal of MONUSCO. In line with this accelerated withdrawal of MONUSCO, the DRC reiterates its demand to the Security Council of the United Nations to sanction all physical and legal persons acknowledged to be perpetrators, co-perpetrators, and accomplices, both material and intellectually, perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and serious violations of human rights, international law, and the Charter of the United Nations on Congolese territory. It is unjust and unacceptable for persons deemed to be responsible for the serious crimes mentioned in various reports of UN experts themselves on the security situation in the DRC. It is unacceptable for these persons to remain to continue to enjoy impunity with the complete silence of our organization and its member states, which have placed the combating impunity as among their main priorities when it comes to internal and external governance. In this regard, the government of the DRC warmly welcomes the sanctions recently imposed by the United States on Rwanda for its support for the M23 terrorist groups and against one of its senior officials involved in the criminal undertakings in Congo. To recall, this terrorist group, which is a proxy for Rwanda, has not honored any of the commitments entered into by the heads of states of the region in the context of the Luanda and Nairobi process. Indeed, not only have they not left the positions they conquered, they are continuing to massacre the civilian population, and they are refusing pre-cantonment and cantonment. They are demanding a dialogue that will never be granted to them. The Democratic Republic of the Congo The Democratic Republic of the Congo hopes that the other states will follow this good example set by the United States of America in order to support the common struggle against impunity, to ensure the triumph of the ideals of justice and solidarity among peoples. The government of the DRC is awaiting the next meeting of the Security Council, which will focus in particular on our request, and we want it to be constructive when it comes to the management of the delicate and laborious process of crafting peace in our country. President, there's another challenge that is of the utmost concern to all of the nations of the world. I am referring to the warming of our planet. Needless to say, there's been an increase in temperature for several decades that has affected the life of everyone in humanity, and is of concern to all of us. Having said that, I am compelled to note that despite the proclamations in good faith of polluters when it comes to stopping greenhouse gas emissions, despite the many fora convened all over the world to stem this scourge, including the 27 COPs, that is the Conference of Member States of the UN to counter climate change. And despite the many resolutions and recommendations adopted at these various bodies, despite all this, the warming of our planet is far from being restricted to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. Despite the COP27 held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt this year, there is concern about a trend toward this temperature rising. This is not very reassuring, and it calls for us doubtlessly to revisit our approaches and our policies that we've adopted. In this context, the African Climate Summit, which will be held in Nairobi in Kenya under the joint leadership of the African Union and the Republic of Kenya from the 4th to the 7th of September of this year, that summit was a welcome initiative and an opportune initiative which shows the determination of Africa to participate actively in addressing this vital question, and now to act as a heavyweight when it comes to providing solutions to global warming and to ensuring future economies that are more green and more responsibility. The Africans emerged from the summit with a set of shared specifications contained in the Declaration of Nairobi, which aim to ensure a reform of the international financial architecture, to ensure more fairness, restructuring, debt alleviation, local transformation of their products, and putting in place a carbon tax regime, including a tax on the commerce in fossil fuels and maritime and air transport. They also reminded the rich polluters of the commitments that they took on in 2009 but have yet to honor. That is to provide $100 billion in climate financing. The Democratic Republic of the Congo calls upon the United Nations and upon the entire international community to pay particular attention to the legitimate claims of Africa. In this context, my country calls for the creation of a fair carbon market, and we want to see incentivizing of prices to bolster the efficacy of climate financing. We hope to see the rapid operationalization of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and we support the idea of mutually beneficial partnerships between the state and the private sector. In the same vein, the Democratic Republic of the Congo reiterates its full readiness to cooperate with all stakeholders, public and private alike, in order to make the most of its strategic minerals, in order to achieve its environmental transition, and to take on bold commitments, notably the commitment of dedicating 30% of its national territory to the preservation of biodiversity, and to aim at a nationally determined contribution, including measures based on 4 major sectors: agriculture, forestry, energy, technology transfer, and adaptation measures. President, multilateralism and the respect for a global rules-based system underpinned has underpinned peace, security, health, and prosperity in large swaths of the world for the last 78 years. The United Nations embodies these principles and remains a key protagonist in order to cope with contemporary existential threats, be they the current food crisis, climate change, terrorism, or pandemics, or nuclear proliferation. None of these critical global threats can be resolved by nations that act by themselves, no matter how powerful they may be. All of this requires multilateral cooperation. To retain the trust of the international community, the United Nations needs to show that it is capable of adapting to the present and capable of effectively shouldering its responsibilities in tackling today's challenges. In order to provide new impetus to multilateralism, the reform of the Charter of the United Nations on the key points, the Security Council, the veto in Chapter 7, the use of force, this is absolutely necessary but will not be sufficient. We have a lot of work to do. The coordination and cooperation among the various institutions and agencies of the United Nations are imperfect. The global challenges are often tackled several times over at various fora, with different angles being taken, sometimes contradicting approaches being taken, and other problems are not addressed at all, with each international bureaucracy aiming to save itself. In this regard, I wish to sound a stirring call, the call of Africa on the whole, a call to enlarge the United Nations Security Council as a guiding decision-making body of the United Nations, to ensure that there are two representatives of the African continent there as permanent representatives in order to ensure fair and representative geographical representation. Hence the relevance and the need to reform our 78-year-old organization, which is somewhat hobbled in the face of current changes and international trends, so as to make it more inclusive in its composition and in how decisions are taken, the decisions that need to take into account the voice of Africa. President, before I conclude, allow me to speak from this high rostrum to speak about the question of violence against women in the context of war and in armed conflicts. It is no secret for anyone that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is one of the African states where sexual violence against women are most disconcerting, due in particular to decades of armed conflict. In order to ease the suffering of women who have fallen victim to conflict-related violence, and in order to begin to repair the harm done to them, my country has put in place specific institutional mechanisms. These are, notably, the National Fund for reparations to victims of sexual violence, conflict-linked sexual violence, and to the victims of crimes against humanity, crimes against the peace and security of humanity. That organization was created in December 2022 and is known as FONARAV. In addition to these initiatives to protect and promote women, the DRC tirelessly strives to change the perceptions that men have about women, notably by removing social structures that create barriers to the fulfillment of women, and to address the power dynamics that underpin male-female relations. Indeed, the skills and resources given to women are not enough in and of themselves to change their condition. It is vital to move farther and to change the social dynamics in couples, in families, and in communities. This is what underpins the promotion of positive masculinity, which is an initiative that I started from the beginning of my mandate at the helm of the African Union. President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, heads of state and government, Secretary General of the United Nations, heads of delegations. In closing, I wish to confirm once more that at the end of this year, general elections will be held in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and this will happen in institutions with an electoral mandate down to the level of the communes. In order to ensure those elections are a success, all parties involved are actively working. The Independent National Electoral Commission, the CENI, has already convened the Electoral Corps and published lists of candidates for national and provincial, legislative, and municipal elections. Provisions are being put in place in order to ensure transparency, inclusivity, equal opportunities, and credibility of these upcoming elections. Invitations have already been sent out to international institutions and international organizations, to NGOs that specialize in this area, in order to mandate their electoral observation missions to accompany the process and to help the Congolese state consolidate its young democracy. The UN is also invited to play a major role via its specialized institutions. The Congolese government thanks already those institutions and NGOs that have been invited that are already hard at work. The Democratic Republic of the Congo remains convinced that the United Nations remains the most appropriate fora to discuss the future of our planet and of the relations both among peoples and among states. Following the holding of the peaceful democratic elections in Zimbabwe, I wish to sound a clarion call here at the United Nations, calling for everything to be done to ensure the immediate lifting of these sanctions against the Republic of Zimbabwe and against its people. Nonetheless, to effectively discharge its important and delicate mission and to deserve the confidence of everyone, the UN needs to embody the values of justice, equity, and solidarity. The UN must be representative of everyone in all our cultural, political, economic, and social diversity. This is the full meaning behind the reform. This is what underpins the reform that the Africans have often reiterated in the fight that we must all participate in. I thank you.
On behalf
All right, so we heard also from leadership from the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, as he spoke about some of the problems in Africa and some of the struggles that they have with the United Nations and how they want to get their voice heard in the United Nations, how they should become more permanent members of the organization that fights so hard for peace and equality, and how reforms to that organization should reflect the equality that they so desperately claim to want to strive for. Thank you for listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I've been your host, Michael Clogs. Find that subscribe button wherever it may be. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. please contact us at depictions.media for more information.